Do you try to stay away from family get togethers because you always get into a fight with one of your siblings? Here's a scenario: you grew up in the same house, you're part of the same family, you were raised by the same parents. Perhaps you were close as kids, perhaps you weren't. But either way, now as adults, your relationship has turned entirely toxic. Every time you see each other, you end up in a massive argument. Yet you still love your brother or sister. You truly want to be friends. You want to have a positive connection. But somehow that seems so far away. But there is a solution out there. And it all begins with answering the all-important question: what color are you? Intrigued? Please stay with me to learn more. I'm Stephen Baroda, rabbi, educator, and I'm a certified professional. I help you to connect better with others by communicating on their wavelength instead of yours. We are very familiar with the expression, treat others as you want to be treated. It's an interpretation of the verse, love your neighbor as yourself, from the book of Leviticus, and it's known as the Golden Rule. For years, I, like I'm sure many of you, thought that this was, in fact, the key to human relationships. If you treat others the way that you want to be treated, everything is going to be fine. Problem is, it's not true. The Golden Rule doesn't work. Instead, it needs to be replaced with what has recently been called the Platinum Rule. Notice some 3 different people have taken credit for coming up with it. But either way, this is what the new rule to live by is: treat others as they would want to be treated. I'll say that again: treat others as they would want to be treated. And in fact, if we think about it, it's actually a much better interpretation of that verse. What does it mean to love someone else in the way that you love yourself? We want to be comfortable. We don't want to be put in situations where other people make us feel miserable, where we are outside our level of comfort, where somehow we feel just like claiming in our skin when we're dealing with another person. We don't want that. So therefore, that's what we don't want for the other person as well. The problem is that what makes us feel comfortable doesn't necessarily correspond to what makes them feel comfortable. In fact, of the 8 billion people on the planet, the good news is that there are 2 billion out there who think and act very similar to you and feel comfortable in the same way as you do, which is wonderful. But unfortunately, there are 6 billion people out there, 3/4 of the world's population, that feel comfortable differently from you. And 1/3 of those, again, a total of 2 billion people, actually have very little in common with you. What makes them feel comfortable tends to make you feel uncomfortable, and vice versa. We've been sold the idea that everybody is the same. It's not true, and that's what gets us into trouble. Once we recognize that there are in fact these 4 different groups of people, and we learn how to communicate with them on their wavelength instead of our own, then communication improves, connection improves, arguments and problems and strife in families and also in other settings like the workplace decline. One-size-fits-all solutions work great for a cap, Here we go. Here's an example. Here's a cap. Has a Velcro on the back. So I can make it smaller. I can make it larger. It doesn't matter what size my head is. It will work. Great for a cap, but no good when you're dealing with human beings. Eimer teaches that there are two elements that make up the way that people feel comfortable. The first of those elements is essentially how we think. And loosely speaking, the way to think of this is right brain thinkers versus left brain thinkers. More accurately, it's divergent thinkers versus convergent thinkers. Divergent thinkers, and I'm going to use the term right brain thinking just because it's just easy to visualize. You can also think of it as a piece of paper and the world is divided. You draw a line down the middle of the piece of paper vertically, and you've got the people on the right and the people on the left. Now, right brain thinkers are people who are ideas people. They're people who are very open to the way that they deal with things. They don't come up with an idea once and that's it, but they're very open to change. They start with the big picture in mind and then work towards the details. Whereas the left brain thinker is the exact opposite. They tend to be quite closed-minded. They think of something once and make up their mind. They start with the detail first and then move to the big picture afterwards. So it's two totally different ways of thinking. The other way that the world is divided, the second element, is more to do with action. And that is, are you a person who is assertive or non-assertive? James Knight, the creator of Eimer, has a beautiful example of that. He says, if you walk into the office of an assertive person, they'll say, sit down, take a seat. Whereas if you walk into the office of a non-assertive person, they'll say, perhaps you'd like to sit down? Would you like to take a seat? Assertive people like to move at a fast pace. They like to be in control of what's going on. They're going to take the bull by the horns and they're going to move things forward. Whereas non-assertive people like to take it a little slower, be less likely to be the person who is going to initiate, but rather they're going to wait for someone else to make the first move. So that's the second element of human behavior that differentiates us. So we are either divergent thinkers, right brain thinkers, ideas people, or the opposite, left brain, convergent thinkers, detail people. And that's one thing that divides us. And then if you think of now the piece of paper divided in the other direction with a horizontal line, below the line we have people who are assertive, and above the line we have people who are non-assertive. So now you have four quadrants. And Eimer gives the name to each of the people in those four quadrants by a color. We call them high red, high yellow, high green, and high blue. We go first of all to the top right. We have the high blue. The high blue is the person who is right brain thinking, but non-assertive. Now they are your people once they get to know you. They love relationships, but it takes them a while to trust people. It takes them a while to decide that, yes, this is a person that I want to do business with or relate to. And they don't jump in. But once they feel that you are part of their world, they're very, very loyal. They're the type of people who stay in positions, sometimes in organizations for 20 plus years. You can have beautiful conversations with them, but you're going to have to be the one to initiate. But they really are the people. They love to brainstorm. They love to have conversations with people and spend time with people, but they do not like to be pressured. Now, if we move in the anti-clockwise direction now, we have the high green. Now, the high green is also not assertive, but they are left brain thinking. And they are not so much, therefore, relationship driven, but they are facts and figures driven. And in that particular case of the high green, they are obsessed with detail, obsessed with accuracy. They're often the type of people who maybe sometimes seem the geek, or they seem very, very focused on what they're doing. They like a task that they know about. They're not too open to new ideas, but they like to be able to work on something, and they like to be able to do their best work and to make sure that everything is accurate and that everything is detailed. Continue working on in a anti-clockwise direction. We have the high red. Now the high reds, like the high greens, are left brain thinking. It's all about facts and figures. But these guys are assertive. These guys are goal driven. They're very often the boss because they get to be there because they are incredibly good at getting things done. They like telling other people what to do. They like driving projects forward. As I said, very goals driven. Sometimes come across though as very bossy as a result of things because they want to be in charge. They want to make sure that things are done. They decide on something once. They're not too open to change, but they are the people who can move mountains and get an incredible amount done. And finally, on the bottom right of the quadrant, you have the high yellows. Now, the high yellows are also assertive. They're also people who will put themselves out there and let you know how they think. They're also leaders, but they lead with ideas. They are much more interested in relationships. They're the networkers. They're the ones who walk into a networking event and say hi to everybody and are still there at the end. They're the people who are likely to strike up a conversation with somebody else as they're crossing over the street and they've never met them before and will never meet them again. And again, though, they like to move quickly, and they have ideas. They're the ideas popping machines. They have ideas coming out of their heads all the time, sometimes criticized for perhaps not being as good at making sure that those things are implemented well, because they're always on to the next idea, and sometimes said to have short attention span as well. But they are vivacious and good presenters, and really, as I say, ideas people. So these four types of people are driven by different things. The high red is goals driven. The high yellow is ideas driven. The high blue is relationship driven. And the high green are thoughts driven. They like to think things through very, very carefully, focus on the detail, and make sure that everything is very accurate. So when you speak to someone who is in a quadrant that is not your own, and as I say, 3 out of 4 people are going to be in that category, you have to learn to communicate in a way that they are going to be comfortable. Because remember that new rule that we're going to live by? Treat others as they would want to be treated. Still, even though I've given you some initial characteristics of what these people are like, you might be asking me, well, that's all very nice and well. Treat someone how they would want to be treated, but how do I know how they want to be treated? So the answer to that question is to figure out, first of all, step 1, in which quadrant do you fall? What is your high color? Which brings me back to that question at the beginning of the video. What color are you? Now, from what I've described now, that it's really that combination of, do you tend to think based on relationships, or do you tend to think based on facts and figures? And do you tend to be a person who tends to be assertive versus a person who tends to hold back and be non-assertive? You may well have figured this out already for yourself. But there is another way, a more accurate way of finding out, and that is to fill in our IMA questionnaire. It's free, and the link should be coming across your screen right now, stephenbaroda.com/questionnaire. When you fill in that questionnaire, you will know very, very quickly, there's only 10 questions to answer, and you will immediately get an answer that tells you whether you are high red, high yellow, high green, high blue. So that's the first step. What color are you? Finding out your high color. The second step is to find out the high color of that sibling that you're having so much problem with communicating with. You end up getting into a fight all the time. And almost certainly, they're going to be in a different quadrant from you. They're going to be a different high color from you. You could, of course, ask them to fill out the questionnaire as well, but that may well be a bit uncomfortable. So therefore, it's a question of process of elimination. People show you how they behave. They give clues to their color, because after all, it's all about thinking and action. So we see how people think and act when we watch them and when we interact with them and when we get to know them. So therefore, by looking at these characteristics of the various eye colors, we can begin to say, you know what, I think this other person is a high yellow, let's say, and I'm a high green, let's say. Now those two are on the diagonal from each other. That's what I call it, right, in that chart. And the other two on the diagonal are the high red and the high blue. What I mean by on the diagonal from each other is that they don't share in common either of those elements. Let's take the high yellow and the high green, right? The high yellow is assertive and right brain thinking. The high green is non-assertive and left brain thinking. So what makes one comfortable makes the other one uncomfortable. So therefore, the next step, and we learn this from the acronym IMA. I stands for identify, and there's the two halves of identify, which we've talked about, identifying your high color, and then identifying the other person's high color. Then there's the M, which is modify. You have to modify your way of speaking, your way of acting in the presence of that person in order to make them comfortable. So in the example that I've got there, let's say you're the high green, and you're trying to have a better relationship with that sibling who is a high yellow. Well, you've got to value their ideas. You've got to be excited to be around them. You have got to be prepared to be a little bit more open in the way you think, prepared to engage in small talk more than you normally would do, even though your comfort level might be much more to be on your own and to focus on things and to be quiet. When you're around them, you've got to make that effort to be a little bit more open. And on the other side, the high yellow relating to the high green, slow down. Be prepared to give them more detail about what you're talking about. Don't get upset when they say, tell me a bit more about that. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, how much information does this guy need already? Be patient. Give them more detail that they need to do. Slow down. Talk to them in a way that doesn't bombard them with information and be overly excited and overly out there. Calm down. Slow down. And all of a sudden you will realize, wow, I'm actually making them feel much more comfortable. And therefore, I'm communicating successfully with them. And therefore, I'm connecting with them far better than I ever have before. I have a free download that I really encourage you to get a hold of. The link for that is coming across the screen now. It's stephenboroda.com/free download, where I go into more detail about the 4 colors and about the issues that can occur, even on 2 people who are on the same side of a line. Right? There are differences that can come up between a high red and a high yellow, between a high blue and a high yellow. Each of them can have their conflicts. They're more intense on the diagonals. I talked a little bit about high yellow and high green. There are similar, if not greater, problems sometimes between high reds and high blues. High reds sometimes even have trouble getting on with themselves because they both want to be the boss. So I go into a lot more detail about that and give you more examples in my free download. So I do encourage you to go to stephenboroda.com/free download and check out that material. And again, go to the questionnaire and find out your high color. So we've covered 3 of the steps. Identify your high color, identify the other person's high color, then M for modify, and then finally the A of IMA stands for a number of different things. First of all, it stands for adapt. But really what this is all about is once you learn how to modify your behavior for a particular person, now when you are looking to have good relationships with everybody you come across, you have to adapt over time. You have to adapt your behavior so that once you pick up, this person is high this or high that, that you then have to adapt your behavior for every single high color and learn to be adaptable in that kind of a way. The A of IMA can stand for accept, that you accept who they are. They're different from you. They're not any better or any worse. Accept them for who they are. And if you can go to the 3rd stage of what the A in IMA can stand for, appreciate, that's even better. You appreciate, oh my gosh, these guys have gifts that I don't have. They really are an incredible human being, which I haven't really seen before. And once you can get it to that level, then your relationship with your sibling, and of course this works as well with your team members at work, with your boss, with your client, anybody that you come across with, that you come into contact with, relationships will just be so much better. Communication will be so much better. Connection will be just totally different. And again, as James Knight, the creator of IMA, says, most of the world's problems can be solved by people learning to connect more effectively with each other. If you're new here, please do subscribe to the channel. Please, if you got value here, which I hope you did, like the video, share the video. When you subscribe, you'll get notifications when new videos are placed on the channel. And the plan is to do that approximately once a week. So I do encourage you to subscribe to the channel. And once again, to learn more about IMA, download stephenboroda/free download. And I look forward to connecting with you more over the time ahead. Thanks for watching.